The sound of her breath was the only thing that didn't belong to them. Rough, quick, alive. The men around her spoke in coins and laughter, their words scraping against the wind like metal on bone. She didn't look up when one of them grabbed her chin to show her face. Eyes down, that was safer. The deal was happening somewhere above her head, between two voices she didn't want to memorize. The older one, with the gold tooth, called her payment. The other one, deeper, slower, didn't answer. She caught his silence before she saw him. It was the kind that carried authority, the kind that made even cruelty wait for permission. They called him Kane Mercer, leader of the Hollow Creek Gang. Story said he'd buried his brother with his own hands after a betrayal, and since then had never let anyone close enough to aim again. His boots were clean, his coat dark, and his expression unreadable as the rope binding her wrists. She's strong, the seller said. Knows when to keep quiet. Good for camp chores, or whatever you want. Kane didn't look at her at first. He looked at the horse instead, the one they were offering in trade. A palomino, young, nervous. Then his gaze shifted. Just once. It landed on her like a question he didn't want answered. She's not for pleasure, the man continued. She's property now. The word landed heavier than the wind. Kane's jaw moved once, like he might speak, but he only exhaled. Untie her, he said finally. The others laughed. You sure about that? I don't like doing business with rope, he replied, voice quiet enough to silence them. When the knots came loose, her arms fell like empty fabric. She didn't run. She knew better. Freedom didn't come from commands, it came from how a man looked at you afterward. He nodded toward his horse. You'll ride. She hesitated. One of the men shoved her, and Kane's hand shot up, stopping him mid-motion. The gesture was calm but final. She'll ride, he repeated. They rode out through the dust-red hills, a slow line of men cutting across the dying light. The sky was the color of dried blood. She sat behind him on the same horse, careful not to touch, the smell of leather and smoke between them. He didn't speak. She didn't dare ask where they were going. When the wind caught her hair, it brushed his shoulder. He flinched almost imperceptibly, like the memory of something soft had startled him. After an hour, they reached the canyon mouth. He dismounted, glanced once toward her, and said, You'll stay by the fire. No one touches you. Not unless I say. She nodded, still waiting for the cruelty everyone had promised. As he walked away, she watched his back, broad, unbent, but carrying a weight no one else seemed to see. Somewhere in her chest, a small thought stirred, maybe monsters don't always look at you when they save you. He didn't hear it. But when he threw another log onto the fire, his hands shook once, just enough for the flame to notice. She didn't sleep that first night. The campfire snapped inside, throwing uneven light against the canyon wall. Every shadow looked like a hand reaching. The men laughed somewhere behind the horses, low, sharp sounds that cut through the dark. She kept her knees pulled close, eyes fixed on the dirt between her boots. Across the flames, Kane Mercer sat with his back against a rock, head lowered, sharpening his knife. He hadn't spoken since sunset. The only movement came from the steady drag of steel on stone. Sparks caught in his beard, then vanished. One of the younger outlaws stumbled closer, bottle in hand. Boss, he slurred, ain't fair keepin' her all to yourself. You don't even want her. His voice carried a challenge, half drunken, half mean. Kane didn't look up. Go sleep it off. The man laughed again. Or maybe she can help us relax a bit, huh? He reached toward her hair, fingers catching the edge of her braid. The sound of the knife stopping was louder than thunder. Kane's voice came cold and flat. Touch her again, and you'll lose that hand. For a moment, no one moved. The fire hissed. The outlaw's grin faltered. Then he muttered something under his breath and staggered away. She didn't thank him. She didn't know if she was allowed to. But when Kane rose and tossed a blanket toward her, her hands trembled before she caught it. It's cold, he said simply. The blanket smelled of smoke and pine. She laid it across her shoulders, watching him walk back to his corner. The firelight caught his profile, hard lines softened by fatigue. She wondered if mercy ever cost a man like him more than cruelty. At dawn, the camp stirred. The men prepared the horses, their laughter quieter now. She sat near the dying fire, half hungry, half afraid to move. Cain came by, tossing her a small tin cup of coffee. "Drink," he said. She hesitated. The cup was dented, the liquid black and bitter. But it was warm, and for the first time since she'd been sold, someone had given her something without taking anything back. He watched her sip, then turned away. "You got a name?" She blinked. "Lena." It wasn't her real name, but it was close enough to one she'd lost. He nodded once. "Eat when the others do. Don't wander." When he walked off, she caught the faintest limp in his step, old wound, maybe. Something human in the rhythm of it. Later, while the men packed, a gust of wind swept through camp, scattering ashes into the air. She reached out instinctively, catching one ember on her palm before it burned out. Cain saw her, just for a second. Their eyes met, his guarded, hers uncertain. Neither spoke. But in that shared stillness, something unspoken passed between them, thin as smoke and just as fragile. When the horses started moving, she followed behind his. Her heart beat slow, heavy, and steady, like it was remembering the sound of safety. And Cain, riding ahead, didn't know why the silence behind him felt a little less empty than before. Rain came before dawn, thin and relentless, turning the canyon dust to mud. Lena sat beneath the overhang of an old rock wall, arms wrapped around her knees, watching drops slide from the brim of her borrowed hat. She counted them without meaning to, as if keeping track might quiet the ache in her chest. Cain was nearby, mending a saddle strap by lantern light. His coat hung heavy with rain, his hands steady despite the cold. Around them, the camp still slept, the others drunk, snoring, or pretending not to exist. She liked this hour, the half-silence between night and command, when even a man like him seemed human. He caught her staring once. "You'll drown if you keep sitting in that rain," he said without looking up. "I'm already wet," she murmured. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not yet kindness. He set the strap aside and stood. "Come closer to the fire." She hesitated, then obeyed. The heat brushed her face, and the smell of wet wood and leather filled her lungs. He poured her a bit of coffee into a tin, handed it without comment. Their fingers didn't touch, but the closeness felt loud anyway. For a long while, neither spoke. Only the rain filled the silence. Then a distant horse whinnied, sharp, urgent. Cain stiffened, eyes cutting toward the ridge. "Someone's moving out there," he muttered. "Stay low." She followed his gaze but saw nothing, just darkness bleeding into fog. The gang had enemies everywhere, other men who wanted what Cain had built. He moved fast, checking his rifle, his whole body alert. But when nothing came, the tension drained out of him. He returned to the fire and crouched again. False alarm. She studied him carefully, the way his shoulders eased once he decided she was safe. Not the camp. Her. When he finally sat, she spoke softly. "You don't sleep much." "Too many ghosts," he said. Her voice trembled before she could stop it. "Do they ever stop following?" His eyes lifted to hers, slow, deliberate. "No. You just learn to keep riding." She looked away, the rain suddenly too loud. He had just told her more truth than anyone else ever had. Later that night, as the others woke and argued over rations, she overheard two men near the fire whispering. They spoke of selling her off again, trading her for gunpowder when Cain wasn't looking. Her stomach turned cold. When she rose to slip away, a shadow blocked her path. "Cain." His voice was low but firm. "Where were you going?" She hesitated, heart hammering. "They said." "I know what they said." He stepped closer, close enough for her to see the faint scar running from his jaw to his neck. "You run, they'll find you. Stay close to me instead." Her breath hitched. "Why are you protecting me?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because no one did when it was me." Something broke open quietly inside her. Not pity, recognition. That night, when she finally slept beside the dying fire, he stayed awake again. Watching the rain trace patterns across her borrowed blanket, he thought, maybe mercy isn't weakness. Maybe it's what keeps a man alive. And for the first time in years, Kane Mercer didn't feel entirely alone. The morning came too still. No wind, no birds, only the soft drag of boots over dirt. Lena sensed it before she saw it, the kind of silence that waits for violence. She was fetching water from the creek when she noticed two of the men watching her, their talk low and mean. One spat into the dust. The other grinned. Back at camp, Kane sat sharpening his revolver on his knee. His eyes flicked up when she approached, reading her face faster than her words ever could. "Something wrong?" She hesitated, then shook her head. He didn't press. But he knew. He always did. By noon, the air was thick as gun oil. The men's tempers stretched thin under the heat. One of them, a brute called Mason, tossed his cards aside. "I'm done talking orders from a man who's forgotten what kind of business we run," he growled. His gaze cut toward Lena. "You're protectin' her like she's a saint." "Ain't no saints out here, Kane." Kane rose slowly. "You're right," he said. "But there's still lines you don't cross." Mason laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Lines? You drew them the moment you brought her in. You used to be ruthless. Now you're soft." Lena froze. Every man in camp stilled too. Kane's hand hovered near his belt. "Say that again." "You heard me." Mason's grin widened. "You lost your edge for a pretty face that ain't even yours." The draw was fast, faster than she could blink. A flash, a crack. Mason staggered, eyes wide, then fell backward into the dirt. The smell of smoke and gunpowder swallowed the moment. No one spoke. Kane stood still, gun at his side, chest rising slow. His eyes weren't proud. They were tired, like something inside him had finally broken. "Bury him," he said quietly, and walked away. That evening, the campfire burned low. The others avoided him. Only Lena dared approach. He sat by the canyon edge, staring at the ground where the shadow of the fire couldn't reach. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "Yes, I did." His voice was hoarse. "There's always someone testing the chain. You stop one, you keep the rest alive." She watched his hands, steady now, but trembling beneath the skin. "And what about you? Who keeps you alive?" He looked up then, eyes rimmed with something raw. "No one. Not until lately." The words hung there, soft and dangerous. She felt her throat tighten. "You can leave them," she said. "You don't have to live like this." He gave a faint laugh, dry as gravel. "Leave? Men like me don't walk away. We fade out or fall down. Either way, the world don't miss us." She wanted to argue, to tell him the world might miss at least one of them, but the words died in her chest. Instead, she sat beside him, close enough that their shadows overlapped. Neither reached for the other. They didn't need to. A single ember drifted from the fire, caught the wind, and disappeared into the dark. Kane watched it go and thought, maybe mercy is the only thing I've got left worth dying for. And for the first time, Lena believed him. The night they left, the desert held its breath. No stars, no moon, just the faint silver of clouds slipping over a tired sky. Lena sat on the horse, her hands shaking against the reins. Kane was beside her, his wound wrapped in a strip of torn canvas, blood seeping dark through the fabric. He hadn't spoken since the gunfight. The camp lay behind them now, smoldering ruins of loyalty and smoke. Every hoofbeat felt like a heartbeat escaping. "Keep your head low," he said finally. His voice was rough but steady, the kind a person followed without question. She nodded, though he couldn't see. They rode through the canyon's throat, the wind whistling like something that wanted to remember them. When the first light began to bleed across the ridge, she looked back once, nothing but shadows. By mid-morning, Kane's horse faltered. He swayed in the saddle, breath shallow. "We stop here," he muttered. She slid down, catching his arm before he could fall. His weight sank heavy against her shoulder. "You're bleeding again." "I've been bleeding," he said, almost smiling. "Don't fuss." She tore her sleeve and pressed it to the wound anyway. The world had gone quiet around them, only the slow hum of flies and the whisper of running water nearby. A river. Narrow, clear, almost hidden by reeds. She led him toward it, half dragging, half guiding. He dropped to his knees at the edge, cupping a trembling hand into the current. Water spilled through his fingers. "Drink slow," she whispered. He did. Then he looked at her, really looked. "You should have run when you had the chance." "I did," she said softly. "Just not far enough from you." Something broke in him then, not loud, not sudden. Just a quiet unraveling behind the eyes. "All I ever knew was taking," he said. "Now I don't know how to keep something without ruining it." She knelt beside him, resting her hands on the ground. "Then don't keep it," she said. "Just let it stay." For a long moment, neither moved. The river kept on whispering its endless story, of escape, of loss, of going somewhere better. He lowered his head, exhaustion pulling at every breath. "You ever think about starting over?" "I stopped believing in beginnings," she said. "But maybe there's still something after endings." He gave a faint laugh that hurt to hear. "You talk like someone who's been through hell." "I'm talking to someone who carried it." The sun rose higher, spilling light over his face, softening the hard edges that life had carved there. She dipped a cloth into the river and wiped the dust and blood from his skin, her touch careful, unsure. When she was done, he caught her wrist, not to stop her, but to feel something real. "Lena," he whispered, "if I don't make it." She cut him off with a shake of her head. "You will." He smiled faintly. "You sound like hope." She looked away, blinking against the light. "Maybe I am," she thought. "Just borrowed hope." By the time the heat rose over the canyon, Kane's breathing had steadied. He leaned against the rock, eyes half closed, a man still fighting the world but no longer alone. The river went on moving, slow, certain, merciful. And when she finally leaned her head against his shoulder, the silence between them felt like peace finding its name.